Hello, my name is Pedro Mora with Pacific Media and Now Polling. From the World Peace Forum, we bring you this time Professor Joel Kovel. He has written several books about Zionism, suggesting a secular, democratic, single state for Israelis and Palestinians. You can add your opinion on nowpolling.ca if you go to Foreign Affairs and then look for Israel. This time, however, Joel Kovel is not speaking about the Middle East, but about the global ecology. In other words, the environment. His hypothesis is that capitalism is the enemy of nature. Therefore, no capitalist effort will be able to stop the impending catastrophe. Let's listen to Joel.
In the 30s, there was an unbridled belief in technology as the solution to all the problems. And this is the culmination of, I might say, the progressive notion. And what was progressive is that man dominate nature. And that's what Trotsky was saying in his, this is 1921 that he wrote these essays. And that has to do with this ecological crisis, which in its essentials is to use a sort of crude metaphor, the coming home of the chickens to roost, you know. That the, you've had basically 10,000 years of human civilization which has, quote unquote, advanced in a certain direction by progressively progress, the idea of progress, and chaining nature and bending nature to man's will, okay? And the capitalist system is the inheritor and the successor to those 10,000 years. Yet it also completes the job by introducing certain features that make it the deadliest and most threatening and catastrophic period in human history. And if we had a little graph here, we could do a better version of what Al Gore did in his film An Inconvenient Truth, where he showed the rise of CO2 in the atmosphere and showed that it's not rising in a linear way, that it's actually rising in an exponential way, like something that builds on itself. And that's as it must be, because the things we make interact. So the more things we make, the more interactions we have, and the more of the toxins are introduced. I'm going to drop the science at this point. I'm not an expert on it, and I want to talk about the humanity part. There's a quite remarkable article by the great Arundhati Roy that was published in the Manchester Guardian recently. I've known this for some time. Back in the 60s, there was the rise of a Maoist movement in India called Naxalites, namely after a place called Naxala. The Naxalites kind of died down, but now, over the last decade, they've become extremely active. And the New York Times had an article about this a few weeks ago, which tells you it's really important. The New York Times cares. The New York Times cares enough to give a map of India, this society with 1.2 billion people, which is undergoing rapid capitalist modernization over the last decade, as you know, and is now returning to its ancient place in the center of civilization, along with its even bigger neighbor, China. Provinces of Orissa, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, and parts of West Bengal. The Indian state can't get to. But they're starting to get to it, and what Arundhati Roy points out is they're starting to cut roads through the jungles, roads that are big enough to land airplanes on, and are like freeways. And the state of India is starting to mobilize to get rid of these rotten, dirty Maoists, who, of course, are playing rough. And they're going to play rough because if you understand the circumstances of their lives, they have been, namely the Indian, poor peasants of India and also the Adivasi, or the forest people of India, are being devastated by that same gigantic machine that is called the modern state, or Marx put his name to, the name to it of primitive accumulation or primary accumulation, or that notion of expanding capitalist relations in such a way that what had been called mere nature is now colonized and broken up. And as Arundhati Roy goes on in this article, it's just a great human being and a great writer, and you just look for it. It's within the last week or so, you'll find it. It's beautiful and heartbreaking that the state of India is about to wage war against several million extremely poor people who are, of course, fighting for their lives. If you have any idea about the devastation of the Indian peasantry, as agribusiness moves into India, as the so-called Green Revolution completes its work, maybe 10,000 Indian farmers a year commit suicide by drinking pesticides. You've perhaps heard this because they're in debt. In the case of the Naxalites, she points out, and there's a really long list in her article of the resources at stake, but just in one state, Orissa, the bauxite that the Naxalites are sort of, so to speak, sitting on top of, is worth, today's price is $4 trillion, which is about twice the gross domestic product of India. That's one resource in one state. And there's somebody who was talking to her who knows these things. He said, these people are finished. The modern state is going to get them. Okay. Well, maybe the modern state is also going to get the people in Alberta. And maybe the modern state is also going to get the people in the Niger River Delta. And maybe the modern state is also going to get the people in Bolivia and Ecuador. Okay. President of Bolivia, Morales, is and what he has said is that the capitalist system is destroying the planet and will continue to do so until the people rise up against it. And that is what the people have to do. And we have to learn to understand it in class terms, but to expand the notion of class and to understand it as the depredations of capital as it colonizes and invades and commodifies the world.